It's really exciting because I feel like this plant has really become popular just in the last like 4 to 5 years. Welcome to The Art of Gardening. I'm your host, Melissa Lala Johnson, and today we will be taking a little tour of my property. I want to show you some of my most favorite plants for a lot of different reasons, either because they have year-round interest, or they're just very hardy, or they're very beautiful, or some of them are a mix of all. So let's get started. My number one most favorite plant that I have used the most on my entire property is the Limelight Hydrangea, which you see that behind me. So what I love the most about the Limelights is that they do very well in the shade, but then they also do very, very well in the full sun environments that I have here. They're very adaptable. You can clearly see the difference that behind me there, it's a little more sparse in the flowering, but they still flower. So in an area that is full shade, it gets a nice batch of color other than just green, which is typical for shaded plants. So, and then of course, in the areas where they get sun, they're just absolutely fantastic. Another thing about the Limelight Hydrangea is that if you are in an area where you don't want them to grow super big and you want them just to be 4 to 5 feet off the ground, if you cut them back to 10 to 12 inches every year, then the new growth is typically anywhere between 3 to 5 feet, depending upon how mature your hydrangea is. And so you can keep a consistent size by doing that every year. On my property, I have wanted them to get really big because I have bigger spaces to fill, and I'm also looking for privacy as that's the street up there. So I want more privacy. So I've kind of let them go a little wild and get a little larger. So let's look at some different pictures of my hydrangea on the property. The other fun thing about them is that they can be used to bring indoors, to dry them, to use in winter projects. And then of course, they're absolutely gorgeous all through the year. You can see from my property in the winter, they really don't need to be cut back until January. And most times I don't cut them back until February, but they have a beautiful beauty about them that they hold through the cold months. So it's kind of like landscaping, but for the winter. So winter landscaping, which I love looking outside and seeing all the balls of hydrangea everywhere. They do get knocked over sometimes with the wind and rain when we start to get some winter storms and heavy snow and things like that. Ice storms will also knock them off. But for the most part, they're pretty hardy year-round, and the Limelight Hydrangea is super hardy. Like I said, have so many of them in a variety of different areas all over the property. Let's get started on the next plant. The next plant you can see behind me is also another plant that I've propagated throughout the entire property, Liriope, right here. I love it as a border plant, and it's also right here, and it's actually flowering now right here. So usually they don't flower till September, but this guy's really going for it. So Liriope is wonderful. It's easily propagatable, so it starts to spread. When it spreads, I'm able to just dig it up and move it to other areas of the garden. And as you can see, I have quite a few areas that have Liriope in them. I absolutely love this plant. It is from the grass family, and it only needs trimmed back once a year before spring. So like in the late winter, early spring, is when I usually just use my lawnmower, my push mower, and just kind of go right over the top of it and then clean the sides up with a little handheld trimmer. But it stays beautiful, and like I said, the only issue I have with it is when grasses sometimes will grow into the Liriope. So I just keep an eye on that and keep those out of there. But for the most part, it's been very low maintenance, and again, has great winter interest all the way through the growing season. It really doesn't start to turn brown until it gets very cold here. We're talking like the end of December, January, it'll start to lose its color. But it's a great plant to have. Let's check out the next plant. My next most favorite plant is the Rose of Sharon. Now the Rose of Sharon and I have a love-hate relationship. I started putting them on my property using propagated seeds from my friend's property and some starts. And then from there realized that my mother had them on her property also. So I was taking her seeds and starting them here. Couple things about the Rose of Sharon. They do get very large, so they grow very tall. I would say probably 10 to 11 feet high. Mine are now, and they're like 6 years old. They flower now. They have great dried stems, so if you bring them in when the seed heads are when the blooms are just about to come out, you can dry them, and they're really beautiful. My issue with them is that they don't have a lot of form. They kind of just like flop over. So that is the issue. This right here, we had a bad windstorm a few weeks ago, and you can see it just kind of like totally flopped over. So, but it's still really beautiful. I love that they will also bloom in the shade. I've got some Rose of Sharon that are in shade. Again, they don't bloom very prolifically, but they do bloom, which is another great plant, a great piece of advice to have if you are someone who's looking for something that blooms in the shade. So cross off your list the next time you see a Rose of Sharon. There's a lot of different varieties too now. It's really exciting because I feel like this plant has really become popular just in the last like 4 to 5 years. So definitely go to your garden center and check out the different varieties that are available. You'll love this one. Let's move along to the next plant. One of my all-time favorites is the iris plant. I have been collecting a variety of different types of iris for many years now, and I have a great collection that I can pretty much take anywhere with me. They multiply wonderfully, they bloom in the shade, and they're even more prolific blooming in the sun. So this is just an all-around winner, and I love the way the leaves look after they're done blooming. They're absolutely gorgeous, almost nearly year-round. In the winter, they start to put off the new growth, so in late winter. So they start looking beautiful. I mean, they're one of the first things to actually look really pretty around here. So this is now in August, so they're a little tiny bit tired, but they're still beautiful, and definitely a must-have for your garden. Let's get to the last and fifth pick for today. My fifth and final pick for today are my beautiful coral bell. They are right here along this border, and I absolutely love them. I love that they give a nice pop of color. They're a little dark right now. These are the obsidian coral bell. When they have the new fresh leaves come out in the spring, they're a little bit lighter purple, but they are a deep dark purple. I think they look phenomenal against the rock and then the white and the green of the hydrangea. I love seeing them up here on the front of the landscaping, and they're very cold hardy. They do not propagate. I have not propagated them. So all of these have just been planted one by one throughout the growing season. There are lots of different colors of coral bells, so I encourage you to check that out because you can get anything from caramel colored to the pinks, purples. They're really beautiful. They bloom in the season with little spikes of flowers, and they're just really very rewarding. So a couple of different things that have gone on here in the last week. It is August in Kansas City, and the plants are definitely starting to struggle a little bit from the heat stress and just growing through the whole season. So actually this quick fire hydrangea here and the limelights were looking a little yellow last week, and I sprayed them with liquid iron to get some more of the green back in, and as you can see, it definitely worked. They're probably due for another spray just because they're so deficient right now with everything going on, and I do not use synthetic fertilizers anymore, so they're probably due for another spray. Now, one thing I do want to mention too, on the next Art of Gardening, I will be discussing with you how I single-handedly beat thrips on this property. I had 3 years of a thrip infestation, and now looking back, I know exactly what I did right, exactly what I did wrong, and I'm going to be sharing all of that on the next Art of Gardening. So thanks so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.